Hi, I'm Penny. I'm a member of the local Heritage and History Association here in Ardnamurchan, and I'm down here at Castnagal to do some digging in a trench that you can possibly see behind me. So I've been having a lovely time digging around just to see what's in what is possibly 18th century pre-clearance houses at Castnagal.
Hi, I'm Dr. Paul Murtagh from Archaeology Scotland, and we've been digging down at Castnagal for the last 2 weeks, looking at what we think is 18th century pre-Highland clearance houses in this wee spot looking above the bay. In these houses here, we discovered ceramics that look 18th century in date, clay pipes, and also really excitingly we found a musket ball and a couple of bits of shot as well. All that kind of material looks like 18th century in date, so that's really interesting in terms of the archaeological evidence. But also these buildings were not marked on the Ordnance Survey map for 1875, and it looks like they weren't marked on William Roy's map of the 1750s, so it looks like these houses are old, pre-Highland clearance houses. So that's a really interesting wee kind of snapshot of this landscape at that time, just before the Highland clearances happened. So that's a really exciting result. So we had 2 houses we looked at. In the house over here, we had a large kind of stone built wall. It looks like they probably cleared the vegetation off of the land, maybe burnt some of it, got rid of all the topsoil, and then built their houses right on top of this subsoil. Sometimes in the 18th century or 19th century, they would use just earthen floors, and they would maybe import earth or clay to make these floors up. But the subsoil is really good here, so it looks like they just built right on top of the subsoil and then lived right on top of that. A few artefacts, as I said, some nice ceramics, the lead shot, and a wee couple of bits of glass. So that's really nice. And this house up here, you can see we're still just finally recording the last wee bits of it. Where the ranging rods are and the entrance there. In that trench we actually found the hearth. So the hearth of the house, these are known as kind of black houses. There was no chimneys and the smoke would just rise up through the rafters. And we found the hearth in the middle of the house. So you can imagine the people sitting around there of an evening and having their meals around that hearth. So it's a really nice wee bit of evidence of the people that lived here. And also, it'll be really interesting in terms of environmental data. We've taken samples of this material, and we can then analyse what they were burning and maybe what they were cooking and what kind of crops they were growing as well. So a really nice wee snapshot of that house and the people that lived here. And then in the far distance, you might not be able to see it, away in the distance there was another house that the History and Heritage Association recorded a few years ago, and a couple of the guys in the group thought that it could be a church.
So what we're doing here, we're investigating this large building. The reason we're investigating is because it looks a little bit different to the other buildings at the far part of the site over there. It's quite large, it's long, it appeared to have very, very thick walls and quite rounded, not just rounded corners, but rounded ends to the building as well, which was a bit different to the other things that we'd found. The position of it was also quite intriguing in the fact that it's quite elevated and it's not fully central but quite central to the bay, and you've got very good views across to Mull, Tobermory, and a site called Ballasgate, which is an early Christian chapel. So the orientation of this building, it's not fully but it's approximately east to west, so there was some idea that it might have possibly been some sort of church or chapel site. So with that in mind and the difference in the sort of architectural styles, we thought it would be worthwhile exercise to investigate. So what we've done is we've excavated a trench here at the eastern end of the building to investigate the inside of it. We've excavated over the wall to see how thick the walls were and how they were built, and then a little bit on the outside to see what's going on there. We had hoped that we might find some nice floor deposits or built floors, whether they be laid stones, but as we've dug down, what we've found is it's been really, really damaged by bracken roots. But what you can see in this area, the higher level up towards the wall that would have been the floor. So we didn't find any flagstones or any laid stone floor, nothing like that. It's just a simple beaten earth floor. We found a couple of bits of slate lying on it and some pottery sherds. And then over at this end of the trench, you can see a large bit of rock sticking out, so that's bedrock. And that would have been at the floor level as well. So when they've built this floor or built this house, they've probably incorporated some of that bedrock into the actual floor layer. And digging through the floor layer, we're finding all of these deposits are quite natural, sort of sterile hill wash deposits that are just coming down from the hill behind this building. On the other side, the walls, we weren't quite sure what was going on with the walls, because obviously there's a bit of a curve to them, very, very, very thick, large stones. But what it looks like on the outside as well is you've got significant collapse of the wall, and down in the bottom of the trench we found more of this natural hill wash overlying huge outcrops of bedrock. So the wall itself is probably that's the inside face, and the outside face is around about here, and then all of that stone has actually just tumbled off after the building was abandoned. You can also see huge stones, huge rocks that have tumbled down the hillside. We were trying to work out whether that might have been the reason for abandoning the building, but it appears that the building was abandoned, the walls had started to collapse before these large rocks tumbled down, and that might have been due to the construction of the road when those stones came down. But it doesn't look like anybody was forced to flee from these falling rocks. So on first look, in terms of understanding what we think this is, it's edging more towards a domestic structure, so another house, but significant stones, significant walls that's been used to build it, and we think it's at least 200 years old, because it wasn't inhabited or in use during the mid 1800s. So it's possibly a bit older than the buildings that we were looking at previously, down closer towards the shoreline.
So we've excavated 3 houses now of the 18th century, which is really exciting. Pre-clearance activity, which is, you know, the kind of stuff we wanted to look at this season. We're back on the 25th of August for 2 more weeks, and we're hoping to look at some of the prehistoric activity in the bay. So join us if you can.